It was like, what do you
Yeah.
want to hear? What do you want to hear? And eventually you break your neck because everybody wants to hear something different.
I think you should rewrite the deck. I think you should
Yes.
rewrite the deck.
I turned off all my electronics and I started talking to myself, full on like a crazy person.
That I remember turning to my guide at one point after and going, what the fuck is a job?
And I realized two things. One is I had totally forgotten what it was like to respond to what I want and talk to myself. I had spent so much time asking everybody else for the answers that I forgot to go inwards and go, hey, what do we want? And the second thing that I realized was that I built this company to go big. And if this company wasn't going to go big and be public and be a massive company, then it was time for me to go home.
See, this is so much more spacious and it's just warm and inviting. It's better than that Zoom.
I'm just going to pull up some apple cider, turn on my fireplace.
See, I've got the cinnamon going because the holiday spirit in here. Oh, how you doing?
Oh, man. I just moved. I bought a home.
Where?
A block from where I live, but
Oh.
on like base of Diamond Head, right across from Tongs.
Oh, amazing. That's so nice. That's
I
cool.
know.
So is this,
this is,
were you renting before or what was, okay. Yeah.
yeah, I was renting and my husband and I got married in May and we've been living
Oh,
in separate apartments until 2 weeks ago. So
oh
now it's
wow.
like, okay, now we're married. We live
Yeah,
together.
yeah. Exactly. Oh, that's amazing. Well, at least it won't be too far for the move-in stuff, right?
Yeah, no. Some of it was embarrassingly like take the truck from here and go down a block, but I'm so cheap that I still tried to get some boxes in myself and then I like pulled it back and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, is me. Okay, I'm not doing that anymore.
Oh my
The
gosh.
movers will take everything.
We did that actually, funny enough. So we were not far from here. We were in another house for about 2 years, and then the people we were renting from were like, "We want to move our parents closer, so you guys
Mm,
can find something else." So we were
yeah.
like, "Okay." But my wife and I are always used to, we kind of like moving because it feels like you sort of take apart all the mental model of who you think you are and all that sort of stuff. And then you get to a new place and you're
Yes.
like, okay, who am I now?
A good way to put
So we
it.
started looking and we were like, maybe we move up north. Maybe it's Connecticut. Maybe it's out west. Funny enough, we ended up moving. It's about half a mile from here. Um, and, and it actually was great because then both boys went to the public school down the street, and so they both ride the bus, and there's this big finished basement and all that sort of, but it was literally me in the Highlander, like just cramming stuff in the back of the Highlander, just like just driving down the street, unloading it quickly, and then going back, and yeah,
Oh my God.
I like that
Blessings.
process though.
I like that reframe. We should all get a little more used to moving, transformation, transition, like embrace it.
Yep. It's funny, I have a family member who has a little one who gets really nervous that they're going to move, and what if they don't have their places and all that sort of stuff. My oldest is cut from my cloth. We moved into this house. We set up his bunk bed. He's up there. It's his first night. And he turns and he's like, all right, where's the next house we're going to move to? like, he's just like, he's like ready for the challenge. So,
My God, dude. I have so many questions to ask you about demo day and stuff. Maybe it'll be
oh
after,
my
but I just want to
gosh.
see,
Yeah.
how are
So,
you?
well, yeah, I guess just a little bit of context for for everyone listening. So we met during Martina, our co-founder, and I went to the Blue Startups Accelerator in Honolulu, Hawaii. And that's where we met Tracy. And I have to say, it was one of my favorite. You hear a lot of like not just mentors, but you also hear other entrepreneurs and startup founders give their advice, and a lot of times it can come from a very sort of like, okay, here's the deal, here's how you do things, and yours was the most sort of like, this shit is crazy, I'm gonna tell you how it affected, like, it's just that like you can really tell it viscerally sort of comes from an authentic place and an authentic story. And I remember thinking, like, hearing your stories and stuff and being like, oh, please tell these again, but
Yeah.
wait until we're
I'm in.
recording.
I'm in. Let's
Um,
do it. Thank you.
so yeah,
Thank you for that.
I appreciate it.
Authenticity is like one of my top values. It's one of the things, I'm sure we'll talk about it with fundraising, but like when I was inauthentic as a fundraiser, I couldn't raise anything. And the moment I realized that I needed to be real is the moment that we raised our Series A and beyond. So it's
Yeah.
important.
I think you have to get to a place though, and not to jump straight to this, but to that point, I think what I found recently is also when you're first starting, it's not necessarily that you're authentic, but you do the same things that you do in the real world, which is like, I put on a suit, I put on a tie. It's very nice to meet you, and I have this facade that I think that you want, which is like, I have my numbers written down or whatever it is, and when it really works is when I'm like, they're like, well, let me see the deck. I'm like, no, 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 no. Let me show you this. I'm going to pull up Google Maps. I'm going to show you where this started. And like you get into it and then they get
Yeah.
into it. And then they're like, oh, like, and now we're in this together. And the people I've met some people that are like, they want to crunch numbers right out of the gate. I can just feel this is not someone I want to partner with. And then somebody else that has never asked me about the numbers. And they're like, when you get to seed, you have to let me know because I want to be part of it. Like, and you're like, yes, you get it. Yes.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I
Yes.
love
It
that. Yeah.
is. Yeah. Yeah. It is an energy. There is an energy that you bring into a fundraise that's so important, and it has to be yours. But the thing is,
Mm,
everybody gives advice around a fundraise, and so it becomes like, for me, it was a very outside in process. It was like, what do you
yeah.
want to hear? What do you want to hear? And eventually you break your neck because everybody wants to hear something different.
So
And
I
it's
think you
not the
should
stuff that
rewrite the
got me
deck.
excited.
I think you should rewrite the deck. I think you should
Yes.
rewrite the deck.
Right, right. You're like, no, I have rewrote it 5 times.
I know. Well, so so I want to go back. I think, and the idea of zero to is I started this when I started very very early when I started Stackless. It was probably within the first week or two. Is I remember the book Zero to One, and I like the idea of zero to one and the sort of like getting to that next step or whatever. But what's so funny is when you start, I don't know, week one, week two, you're like, okay, great. What's my benchmark? Like, what am I working towards and where am I? And this journey, especially in the first like year, is you just sort of feeling around in the dark. So I'd love to hear, like, even before we get into entrepreneurial, like, what in your history from family or upbringing or just the way you're built, sort of were the building blocks that led to the entrepreneurial path?
My parents were entrepreneurs, so they worked together. They ran a clothing company, or as my dad would say, the schmata business. So it was like every growing up, I grew up and it was, even though I'm an only child, and people are like, wow, you're really down to earth as an only child. And I'm like, yeah, but I had an older sibling and that was the company business, the family
Mm,
company. And I was like, well, it was always talking about the company. And I actually thought that would make me repellent to starting a company. And I told my
right.
parents, I'm never going to be an entrepreneur. I don't want to talk about business at the dinner table. Like I just want to be connected to you. I just want to eat my food. But I think also that alongside my dad is a MacGyver. So he always says there's a tool for every fool. And he's not handy. I mean, God bless him. He's Jewish. He's like, he'd much rather hire the handyman, but he also tries to figure things out. And so I always learned, from little scratch, little nicks around the house that there was always some way to fix it if you were really resourceful. And I think it came from my parents growing up both very poor. My dad from Brooklyn, my mom from Taiwan. And so we were always resourceful. I mean, if you look in our fridge, like the crazy meals I can make from leftovers, they're sometimes better than the original meals. I think that mindset makes you realize that like there is no, you try to have the benchmark, you try to have the templates for a startup, but you really just have to MacGyver your way into revenue.
Hmm. Yeah. So that, like, So you were part of that, like what part of the business or being in and around of it, like were you sort of you were around it and then were you hands-on or like what was the sort of path there, say pre-school?
Yeah, so I probably spent every summer in the family business and like when I was little doing nothing, but as I got old enough, like they'd had me filing. They had me doing little odds and ends, running errands. So in that way, I was very much a part of the business, but I also would watch my parents talk about it and I watched my mom on Sundays work, but she would get the Sunday scaries. I couldn't interpret it as a kid, but it's something that would come to haunt me later because like work was the wrapping around our family.
Right.
Yeah.
So did you want to keep going kind of with their business? When you went off, did you think that you were going to get into business or what was the sort of like as you set away from the house, like
Yeah, yeah.
what was the sort of like mindset at that point?
I think I told my parents pretty early on that I didn't want to continue with the business, that the fashion industry just wasn't for me. And they were cool with it. They respected it. But funny enough, I started my company in college. So, like, the moment I escape the nest, what do? I go into entrepreneurship. It's like, okay, I guess I can't really fly far from the nest. So, it was when I was 19 was my first business, which was called the Dish Dash, and it was like restaurant listings that would offer student discounts, and it came from this love of downtown LA because that's where my parents' office was. So I spent a lot of my childhood there, and it's also right the backyard of USC, which is where I went to school. And so I really loved downtown, and I was trying to get people close to downtown. And so that was my first business, and then eventually that business I took to with much more seriousness when I was 20. I almost dropped out of school to do it, but I decided to stay and graduated.
So did that end up evolving into Choose? Like, so you kept that running and then it kept it running and then you pivoted and sort of scaled it from there?
Yeah, so there came a point where like advertising through restaurants, it's a grind. It's very competitive. There's not that much efficacy really. And so I started to realize that the opportunity was with catering. And so student organizations would come to me and say, "We want to cater an event, but we always order Subway or Domino's because we're on a budget." I was like, "Okay, what if I put that budget to local restaurants that served much better food?" And they were like, "Sure, if you could just take care of it, yes, we'll send the budget to you." And so then I started to go to the restaurants that I was doing advertising with. And I said, "What if I brought you catering orders and you gave me a 10% cut?" And they were like, "Catering orders from USC, it's a gold mine. We don't know how to tap into it." Like, absolutely. And so then I didn't have any funds to start. So I used an e-fax line. That was $5 a month.
Oh, eFax.
Oh,
Oh,
yes.
my goodness. I love that.
And then a Word document template. And that's how I started. I just got in the middle of orders transacting them. And that got me the first revenue and traction. And then I won a competition at USC and won like $5,000. And I was like,
How could
$5,000.
I ever spend all of this?
Oh my God. I'm just rolling in wealth. And so,
Yeah. I hired 5 employees.
yeah,
We
yeah,
got an office. Like, yeah.
right. So it was with that momentum, that energy, a little bit of that capital that I continued with the business once I graduated.
So what was the okay, so what was that period then between so you graduate and then between the original concept to what turned into Choose and where was that sort of inflection point where it was not a self-employed income
Right,
that it was
lifestyle
like it
business.
was a startup. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the one of the big milestones, 'cause you got to imagine, I'm living back at home because I can't afford my own place. My mom is my bookkeeper, so she and I are cranking on this, small business. Um, and I ended up meeting an engineer who became my co-founder. So Jeff was my co-founder, and he and I worked together, and he automated our first website. I remember the website was up. I took a nap and I woke up and the first order had been done completely automated. And you have to imagine every order I was putting in 15 to 30 minutes of calling, e-faxing, right, to make sure it
Right.
was good. It happened instantaneously. I cried. I was like, this is the future. Right? It's the
Oh
simple
my
moments.
gosh. Yeah, totally.
I think that was a big inflection point, but probably like that was a little bit of the embers. We started to pour gasoline when my co-founder sat me down and said, "This has legs. This is a big industry. We can scale this. Let's go raise money." And it put the fire in me. And that's when we applied to the 500 startups. And once we got into that program and moved up to San Francisco, it was night and day because we had started the company in LA and we tried to raise money and I couldn't even get investors to pay for my coffee. I mean, there wasn't capital down there. Arguably, I don't know if there's that much now, but nothing like San Francisco. And then we get into 500 startups. And once we move up to Mountain View, it was a whole different story. Like you live, eat, and breathe just all tech, all innovation all the time. And that's what allowed us to raise 1 million of our seed round. And then we got an office in San Francisco, and that kicked off everything.
Oh my gosh. So what was the period between website automation crying and then seed Mountain View? Like what was that sort of?
It was probably it was probably 9 months to a year. Like the story
Okay.
glosses over the agony. And the agony was I had to chase down Christine Tsai, the managing partner, a director of 500 startups, by talking to anybody I remotely knew that had gone to 500. And she eventually got so many referrals that she was like, "Who are you?" And I was just like, "I don't know." But secretly, I was just like begging people, please, 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 put our name on her radar. And that process took a lot of time. And I mean, there was a period where we almost gave up I mean, there were many periods of almost giving up, but that was one of them because my co-founder was living on his savings. I was sleeping on my parents' couch. Like we weren't raising any money in LA. It was getting intense. Right up until that moment we got into 500.
What was the energy between you two and just mentally in that, like the week before you got in? You know what I mean? Like, was there a sense of what we're going to do is inevitable, or I'm just sort of watching and listening to the universe to see what's going to happen to us? Like, what was the, you
Oh
know?
my God. Yeah, I don't think I had a spiritual practice at that point. So surrender wasn't exactly in my book, but I will say my co-founder and I got in a huge fight and I was at a pitch competition and I pitched and we'd been pitching for a while. And later on at the end of that competition, he gives me the feedback and we were in his apartment in Venice and he gave me the feedback. He was like, I don't think the pitch was good. In fact, I don't think you pitch well. And it was the first time I had heard anything negative like that about pitching. And I was like, you're telling me now? You're telling me now? You should have told me so much earlier. And I remember I walked out of the apartment. I like went to some stoop somewhere. I like cried. I mean, we were really like at our wits' end, and afterwards, we like it was fine, but everything was heightened. Every emotion, every rejection gets so much harder. It's that vicious cycle downwards, which, then you get into 500 and all of a sudden it's a virtuous cycle. All of a sudden good things happen. But yeah, we were definitely on the down.
Wow. So how did it then lighten up and how did it feel once you were in 500 and what was that process like?
Yeah, I mean, you're familiar with that process. We move up there. It was 4 months. I think I got sick 3 times. There are like, there are photos of me like asleep at the desk. I had a crazy amount of fun. I think there were 13 other companies that were there in that batch. We worked our butts off. It was all play, all work, everything that you can fit in. Um, but what my co-founder and I did well is we said, of all the things that 500 could offer us, what's the one thing we want out of it? I think you and I may have talked about this. Is it the mentor network? Is it how to run our business better? And we were like, no, we want to raise $1 million. That's the number one thing. And so we organized everything around that. So when I actually started to fundraise, my co-founder, who's technical, is an engineer, he ran customer service. Like he just pitched in and did everything so that I could focus on fundraising because fundraising is exhausting. And I would find I'd do 3 pitches, which like whatever, that's 3 hours, that should be fine. And I'd come back and my eyes would be crossing as I was looking in my inbox.
No, I've taken 2 naps today, by the way, 2 30-minute naps. Like, it's one of those things, like, you get into it, and you start burning so hot, and then I go upstairs, and I set, like, 3 alarms, and I get under the covers, and then I wake up, like, 29 minutes later, and then I come down. I'm like, "Okay, I've cooled my brain off," and then I,
Right.
like, do it again.
Right. Right. I think that's a perfect metaphor, right? It's like all that heat and there's emotional heat, you're not just firing cognitively, and intellectually. It's emotional because there's so many rejections in the process. So for us, like demo day was huge. I was in speech and debate in high school, so I know how to give a presentation. And I really went up there in full drama, like as dramatic as you can be about a corporate
Nice.
catering company. Okay. We were
Nice.
the most boring company out there, but we got a lot of accolades because we were dramatic, we were entertaining. And that was the pinnacle of me being I was so sick in San Francisco demo day. I was like, I had a fever, I could barely sit up, and then they called my name, and I was like, "Boom, I'm on." And I stand up, I pitch my heart out, I retreat back into an office after my 3 minutes. I check my phone, and an investor had tweeted me and was like, "I love your company, where are you?" So I have to get up, and I have to go meet him. He ends up investing. Like, it was like the Wild West. It was such an adrenaline high, and I'm so exhausted.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Did you put that as part of the you guys do realize I'm about to fall over, right? Okay, so, like
I don't know if I did
oh
say
my
that. It may have added to the
gosh.
drama, though.
Totally. So did that really just, like do you feel like that moment was another sort of inflection point where after that part, it just went sort of further faster?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say the demo day, building up that momentum, raising the million, it builds the momentum in the sense that all of a sudden you have the money to hire the team. And hiring that first team was like, it was an honor. It was a thrill. Keep in mind, I'm like 22 at this point. I had never worked for anybody full time. I'd never managed anybody. So I had to level up so quickly and learn things that were really basic. For a lot of founders that start, in their 30s or in their 40s, I was just like, what the heck is this game? But it built a fire and a momentum for us to get started. Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine, that there's so much responsibility at that age in that sort of someone's given you $1,000,000 and is like, you gotta do this wisely, and all the things that you're doing brand new, like, hiring and sourcing and training and onboarding and selling and, that's amazing.
It's like
Um
there are pros and cons of being that young and raising. One
Mhm.
of the pros being you're so naive to the value of money. Like the first time I got a $20,000 check, I was
Yeah.
floored. I was like, this is more money than I've ever like looked at one time.
Right.
Who could do this? How could one possibly afford a $20,000 one-time investment?
Right.
And so it really and we were scrappy. We were all young, at the early teen. None of us were I don't think any of us were married. So we would all go to cafes on the weekends and work together across San Francisco. I mean, we were complete nerds for the
Yeah.
company, but we also loved it.
Nice.
Yeah.
How was that first, like, how was the culture and the energy and the feeling, say, first, what, 10 employees?
So the first, beyond Jeff, our first 2 employees, I knew them. And so one of them had actually been my I had worked a part-time job as a food tour guide in college. So my boss, another Jeff, we hired him to be one of our first employees. Um, and so like honestly, this first team, it felt more like family. And we were really close. We had like a very yeah, we were just a culture where we were all in, we were all foodies. We
Mhm.
loved the hustle, we loved the chase. We were flush with money, right? So we hadn't hit any of the hardships yet. And we were Jeff and I are very like loving people. We care a lot about humans. We like ask you how your day is, you know? So there was a lot of like warmth. And then we also did weekly team dinners. We called them susitias, which is the Spartan term for the final meal before you go out to battle because it could be your last. And we would rotate. We would cook together, we would eat together, we would hang out the office and afterwards together. Like it was a very, very special, special time.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know, I know there are, and I know there are more formal sort of stair steps for these things. And I'm not going to say I'm right, but like 0, 20, 50, 100, and then 250 and 1,000, whatever. Like there are very sort of like, and I joined a startup when we were 120, and within the 2 years that I was there, we were 1,200, and there had already been like a bunch of acquisitions and all sorts of stuff. And what was that? What was the next turning point? I know the feeling when you have that sort of tight knit group and you're all together, and then all of a sudden it sort of shifts, and it's like not to like not to dehumanize it, but like then it's headcount, and then it's
Yes.
like, you know what I mean? Like, and it flips to sort of that other thing. What was that sort of period when you had to sort of evolve into that next stage?
Yeah, I would say that at about 50, things
Mhm.
started to change. We had HR at that point. Um, I would say our culture, like the core cultural tenets didn't shift. So like I'm an executive coach now, right, for founders and for leaders. And our core values, we upgraded, we built them when my co-founder and I were just the two of us. We rebuilt them at 20, and then we kind of evolved them at 200. So like 220 and 200 were big points for us to be like, something about the culture isn't quite aligning or fitting as we grow. And so that's where we really focused on sort of, we were a love culture. At 200 people, we became a love and excellence culture, right? At 50 people, we had HR, although our people team was awesome, right? They were right there in it with us, but they were kind of the first people on our team that had families. And
Yeah.
so, but they also had the startup energy. They would spend time with us when they could. So it didn't feel all too different. But I would say around 50 to 75, we started to notice that some of the early employees, they were starting to leave or burn out or get bored. Frankly, their growth trajectory, they wanted something different. And so, and what would happen is sometimes the early employees, when they leave, things get toxic because people get really scared. They're like, "Oh my god, your most loyal people, the people who've been here forever are leaving. The culture's tanking. Everything's getting bad." And so you have to work with and address that fear over and over again, and let people know, like, it's okay. Like, we're letting them go in their wherever they wanna go, 'cause it was really for most of them, it was voluntary, we didn't fire them. But you have to manage the fear, and then it also gives you the chance to grow new wings, and to shed old skin, and to say, yeah, where we were a family before, we are more of a team now, but we still care about you, and we're going to hold you to higher standards. I think the standards and the excellence part in the early days, it was just like, put in the hours, you'll learn.
Yeah.
Then later on, it was less about hours, but more about what are the standards for performance, and that was a big shift.
Right. Where did you end up? Where did the company end up, sort of when you started getting to the pre-acquisition kind of period?
So our peak was 300 employees. It was 100 full time and it was 200 part time because we had delivery and logistics. Yeah.
How was it right around that time? Like, do you remember? Like, how did it feel going from I love downtown LA and I found a hack for USC catering and I could make 10% to being like, there's 300 plus team
Oh my God.
members.
I mean, we were doing almost $20 million a year in sales. Like it was astronomically different. I was astronomically different. Like 7 years in, so I'm about 27 at this point. I underwent, it was 27 or 28 that I had met someone who I thought was the love of my life. We got engaged, and 6 weeks before the wedding, he got cold feet, left, and I never saw him again. Like, I went through a crazy heartbreak just after we raised the Series B. Like I started to, I've been working a lot for a long time. I had made the shift towards paying myself market as opposed to under market. I think that took me about 7 years or 8 years, right? So I'd say actually 2 years before we sold, um, I had a real heart to heart with myself where I was like, you know what? If we don't go big, like we really need to grow this company, but I'm tired and I need to do things had really changed for me too. I started to spend a lot more time advocating publicly for Chewse and our culture, recruitment, and the brand, and I loved that. Um, but things had shifted. The other thing is I walked into the office and I was the CEO. I wasn't Tracy anymore. And so all of a sudden, I would notice people would sit up a little straighter, and that was overwhelming for me because, I don't like having that kind of power. I like being Tracy. I like being like, hey, I got some feedback. Now it was like you would never get feedback unless you had a very formal survey or unless it was one of your execs, because then they were close to you. But there was very clear hierarchy and things that I would say people would take extremely seriously. And so I had to be just more considered about when I shared feedback.
Right.
And when I made mistakes, I had to really own it in front of 300 people. Like there was a lot of pressure that I had to grow into and navigate. And I was bullied when I was a kid. So groups fundamentally always make me a little bit nervous. And so to have groups that big of a group, and they're like, you are paying them, right? They are relying on you financially and for purpose, right? For a lot of them, this
Right.
job like made them very purposeful. It was an enormous amount of pressure. And in my 20s, I didn't know shit about shit.
Yeah. How did the acquisition come up? Was it one that you all were looking for? Did it come to you? Like, what was the sort of process there?
No, I mean, it honestly came from we wanted to raise the Series C. We ran out to raise and we couldn't. The food delivery industry had just suffered from a couple of consumer startups right before us, right before we went out, had failed. Like huge fundraisers failed. And so people were super skittish. And we were actually growing at a very decent clip. We were meeting our board projections, we were growing, we're scaling to new markets. But, and fair enough, these were VCs who were focused on like software, not on delivery and logistics. They looked at the failures, they looked at our model, they were like, I don't know if we know this model well enough. And so we couldn't raise the C. And that was kind of the defining moment. And I didn't know. I was like, what do I do? I could cut deep and we could become a lifestyle business
Right.
or we could sell. And I couldn't figure it out. I was so full of guilt. I felt the weight of my investors. I felt the weight of my team, my clients, the restaurants that we were sending hundreds of thousands of dollars to, like
Hmm.
off many of them like single units that we were a huge part of their business. And I was like, I'm going to disappoint them. And as a people pleaser, I hate to disappoint.
Yeah.
So I had to, and a decision had to be made. And so I went into my living room. I didn't go into the office. I turned off all my electronics and I started talking to myself, full on like a crazy person. I'm talking to myself. And I spend like an hour and a half talking out loud to myself. And I realized two things. One is I had totally forgotten what it was like to respond to what I want and talk to myself. I had spent so much time asking everybody else for the answers along my 10 years that I forgot to go inwards and go, hey, what do we want? Are we still in alignment? And the second thing that I realized was that I built this company to go big. And if this company wasn't going to go big and be public and be a massive company, then it was time for me to go home. That was just the truth and the honesty. And so I came back from that, and that was the decision that we needed to run the sale process.
Did you feel that after that session, did you feel just confident in in that decision and just executed against it after that?
Once you know your truth, it is very hard to put that cat back in the bag,
Right.
thankfully. So I wouldn't say that it was a joyful process, but I was clear.
Yeah.
I was clear.
Nice.
There was no turning back.
And how did the process go?
Brutal.
Oh.
Absolutely brutal. Like we we tried to raise, we failed at the Series C and made this decision in November of 2019. So we start the process right then.
Mhm.
And it's a lot like a fundraising process. A lot of entrepreneurs I mentor and coach are like, "What's it like? This mysterious black box of selling?" And it's like, "Oh no, it's not that scary. Like it's like a fundraising process in some ways. Like you build a pipeline, you use relationships. You never say that you're selling your company. You say we're looking for a partnership, right? Um, you try to speak to the CEO or VP of product. Sometimes you speak to corp dev, right? So there's kind of like there's a way to structure it to go out and increase your odds of success. Took us, like about 4 to 6 months, the time of a standard fundraise. Um, but what we faced and what we didn't realize was COVID. So we had basically, verbally agreed, I think even signed the letter of intent around the sale, and we're just kind of working our way towards the final agreement. And I come into the office, um, and I remember I looked at my VP of marketing, Britt, and her face is as white as a sheet. And I was like, "What's happening? Someone die?" And she's like, "Well, our revenue is going down significantly. We just churned out like 15 clients because of this COVID thing." It was like the
Oh.
earlier days of COVID. And I'm telling you, over the course of a week, we went pretty much dropped to zero. Like our revenue that we had spent 10 years building, our client base, gone. Gone in the
Oh
course
my
of a
gosh.
week. You know, you and we had already had half of our team was going to be hired by the acquirer. And we had
Mm.
worked with the acquirer meticulously on matching them. We had had them in the office, like people were excited. We were going to give them a new home. Once the writing was on the wall, basically our acquirers pulled out. We had to run emergency layoffs. We had to do it within 48 hours. The t- it was, I had to basically go back and beg the acquirers and say, "What price would you do this deal for?" Um, our venture debt providers froze our credit line. We could never talk about that. And and then there were rumors I had heard from I don't know how many of our employees that like we were making off with a great deal. Um,
Oh,
and we couldn't
that's
tell them
uh,
we couldn't tell them
ouch.
everything that was happening behind the scenes
Yeah.
with like their credit. And so me and my VP of finance were like in a war room every day. We did a layoff, we laid everybody off and then ourselves. We couldn't hug most of the people because it was the pandemic, and we had a quiet and sad sale. I mean, it was done. It happened, but it was a brutal, brutal process that took me. So it wasn't just the grief of selling, but the grief of the pandemic, the weird stillness of that post-pandemic world where it's not like I could meet up with my friends, my founder friends, and be like commiserate. Like I couldn't see anybody. Um, it was definitely I've had some low points in my life. That
Oh my
was that was
gosh.
one of the top five.
I imagine that is so hard. Wow. I mean, after that, did you take time and just like what sort of you time did you take after that?
So for the couple months after, I had a friend whose business was going gangbusters. He was in grocery delivery. So I contracted with him for a few months, but I realized I was like, I need to take time. Like I'm grieving a
Right.
10-year relationship.
Yeah.
And so I told myself I'm going to take 6 months and my net worth is going to go down over these 6 months. And that was just a concerted effort to go against the grain and be like, no, I'm taking my time.
That's great.
And I had this whole I'm a surfer, so, like, I planned this whole Southeast Asia trip where I was gonna be surfing and couldn't do that. So, my husband and I, we decided let's spend a few months in Hawaii, and that's when I moved to Hawaii in the midst of grief, shame, anger, confusion. We moved out here, and what was the place of refuge turned into like a place of deep alignment. And I realized I love it here. But that period, like people looked at my sabbatical and they said, like, oh, you got to surf in Hawaii every day. You must have had the best time. And now I coach people through these transitions, these sabbaticals, and I'm like, no, like I had a great time and I had the most anxiety riddled time because I was making no income. I had no idea what I wanted to do next. I had a full identity crisis. And piled on top of that, I was grieving my baby. And so, like, it looked great on the outside, but the inner experience was one of turmoil and sadness. And
Right.
that was really the defining factor of me taking that time off. And I don't think people talk about that enough. They just post the Instagram like travel reel, and it's worth
Right.
talking about the flip side of it.
Yeah. How long did it take to sort of to then start to heal and come out of that?
Yeah, I'd say a few months into it, I started to follow my curiosity. And every day I would decide I would learn one cool topic or one new thing. And this was my way of sort of experimenting with getting positive, curious energy back into my system again. And I tell people, founders, leaders, professionals who are on sabbatical, like they try to rush straight into the what do I do next? And instead, I would say, how do I get my good energy back? And so I spent a lot of time doing things that I couldn't monetize. I learned about nutrition. I surfed a lot. I learned about the ecology out here and the ecosystem is, the nature out here is so beautiful. I started to train in psychedelic guide work because I was very interested in psychedelics. And then
Mhm.
I started to hold space for entrepreneurs that I had once mentored. And that's what got me into coaching. But it was a series of, like, following my heart and also doing an audit. I looked back at my calendar and I was like, "I did like being a CEO. What did I like about it?" And one of the big things was mentoring other founders. To the last hour of the company, I would make time to mentor another founder. And that's kind of so it took me probably all in all about 9 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's funny that there's an interesting intersection there with my I had a bit of a shift, not in the same way, but there was a definite shift last year that was sort of in the same vein. Um, it was two Halloweens ago is when we sort of learned that my mom had cancer, and that only took like a couple of months. It was January of last year that she passed, and then it
Oh,
was like
so
3 weeks
sorry.
later that her dad, my granddad, passed. And then in the same time, I was working for an agency that I thought was like home and that I loved it. It was a great culture. And then big old layoff, like 4 or 5 months after. And so, like, the first half of last year was sort of like, who am I? what, what am I doing?
Oh
Where is
my
the universe
goodness.
taking me? Whatever it is. And funny enough, I had two journeys,
Yes.
and I loved it because I loved as you can tell from my moving every 2 years, literally and physically taking those sort of neural pathways about how you see the world and like how you think about things and your mental models completely taken apart to the point where I had one moment during that I remember turning to my guide at one point after and going, what the fuck is a job? Like I was so confused. I was like, what is it? What is the like for the first like it took a while to sort of come back, but I was like, what is that is so weird. Like and so I guess my intention had worked like it had almost taken everything apart. Um which sort of then allowed me to then re-look at everything, and that was one of the moments when I sort of said I'm never going to work for anybody else again. And instead of consulting and help other people build things that I want to build things, and so but that, like, it was about that same sort of period of about 9 months last year from January, and then we launched, the first iteration of Stackless in September. Sort of similar in that place, but, like, yeah, so interesting going through a period where you're basically, like, you wipe away your identity and your ego and your how you think things are gonna go, and, like, and then you have to sort of, like, start putting it back together again. Such a raw period.
Oh my God. And I
Um
mean, I still grapple with the energy of the founder because in many ways, there's a part of me that says, Tracy, you sold out. You could go back. You got all the contacts. You know how to run a startup. Go raise money again. Go do it. You have sold out by being a coach. And for the first few years, I couldn't even say that I was a coach with a straight face. I'd be like, I'm a coach. Like
But
it
you
takes.
get to do it. You get to experience, and this is what makes my ADHD neurodivergent brain happy, is the fact that you get to do it through a bunch of other people and
Yes.
almost ride a bunch of different waves and experience a lot of different cycles and moments and periods that you normally would have to have one big wave for 10 years. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, it is, and I also see it as a mitzvah, in Jewish culture, there's a mitzvah, there's a good deed. Like, I went through chaos, and part of why I like to be authentic about it is because we do not do any services or any favors to other founders when we bottle it up and say everything's fine, we're crushing it. And I feel that it is part of the gift that I can offer to walk the path alongside the founders because we are walking to run your own company, to be an entrepreneur, is to walk the path and build your relationship to uncertainty. You are walking into the dark forest. And you know what? With as many frameworks as I have, I can't cut down the trees for you to tell you the exact path, but I can hold the lantern a little bit ahead so that you know kind of what corners you have to navigate. And I feel that being that real helps the mental health of people that are creating such incredible social change and impact big cultures because sick founders create sick cultures. And so I want healthy founders. I want them to be well. I want them to think about the ethics and the goodness of their decision, not just growth at all costs. And that's really satisfying to me.
Well, and you got to get your own calluses, from
Mm.
swinging the axe. I'm like, you can't have someone else do that.
Loving the lumberjack analogies.
We're
Swing that
leaning
axe.
into it, right? I go get my plaid. Um, but like, but I mean, you do have to have those, but it is so helpful to have someone that, like, even as you pause and you sort of, like, your hands are bloody and you're like, I don't, like, is this even the right tree? Whatever. But to have someone go like, no, 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 you're not, you're in the right forest. You know what I mean? Like this, you're okay. And then you go, okay, okay. And it just, because a lot of times without that, you just ask the empty forest. And then you're like, am I crazy? Like, do I like, so that's so cool that, being that sort of, that guide in that way, is awesome. And I'm sure you get to see different experiences that you can also share with other founders that you wouldn't have if you
Yes.
just had one other experience.
Right. Because there's like, so the surface level work that we're doing is we're talking about goal setting, how do you manage people, hiring, firing, culture, fundraising. But what's always under the surface is what is your relationship with uncertainty? When you're faced with uncertainty, do you go ask everybody else what to do? Do you go look for a framework? Do you look for someone to tell you what's right or wrong? Or do you come back inwards? I was in the first camp. I would ask
Right.
everybody else for the answer. It would slow me down. It was oftentimes an uninformed answer because they're advisors, but they're not in my business. And it would create whiplash among my team where I'd have one call and want to do this and another call and want to do this. And so a lot of the founder and entrepreneur journey is a homecoming. Do, okay, what is it that you actually want, need, or think is right? And let's follow that and that wisdom and that intelligence.
So who for anyone listening that's either thinking about starting or is in the middle of their journey, who's your ideal kind of person to work with from an entrepreneurial
Mm.
perspective?
Mhm. I love working with founders they feel non-typical. Like they feel like a fish out of water in tech.
Hmm.
And they
Yeah.
might not be, but I get all kinds of people in all shapes and sizes, but some people who are like, "Oh, maybe I'm just too old for this. Why am I starting this? Do I belong? It's all young people." You
Right.
know? Or I get women that are like, "Oh man, I'm not as aggressive or as assertive." Or I get men who are like, "Man, I'm not out for blood." Like I actually have a deep spiritual practice and I want to achieve. So I think it's the people that feel, I also work with a lot of neurodivergent people. So I have several diagnosed ADHD founders and also many who are undiagnosed but suspect that they have that. Right. And so it is the atypical because I felt atypical. I was 20, woman, had never done anything in tech before, was non-technical, starting in this world. And my journey was not just the head journey. And I love the cognitive, like I love training people up on goal setting. Do not get me wrong.
Yeah.
And when we have the intellectual knowing and we still don't act, that's where the fun begins. Because then we're diving into what is the emotional blocker?
Hmm.
What is it? What's actually like blocking you in your throat from saying the thing that you need to say to that investor that is really bugging you? What is the emotional blocker to you holding your boundaries to make you a better leader? So I think the non-typical is my favorite.
Nice. I love it. Um, so I would say, normally I would ask to kind of wrap like what sort of two pieces of advice for an entrepreneur or founder, but I'm actually interested in this instance too. What would one piece of advice that you would give to somebody who hasn't started the journey yet? And then what's a piece of advice that you would have to somebody who's early on the path?
For those who haven't started, mm, I think the key is momentum and building up that good energy around momentum is very, very difficult. I know many people who get in their own way and in their own head. And so I think every path to starting a company, it starts with a little experiment. I don't care how little and dumb. Talk to 5 people about your company. Do not be precious about it. And consider that an experiment and run an experiment every week, but let it evolve. So, kind of a daisy chain of experiments. And
Yeah.
don't worry about experiment 2, 3, or 4. Just worry about the next one because that is starting the momentum means you need to focus on how do you fill yourself with good energy towards your business and towards the idea. It's a baby, right? So kind of like a baby in utero, how do you give it nourishment? You give it good energy. How do you give it good energy? You share it with people. And when you share it with people, you'll get a whole range of responses, but it starts to feed it. It is literally like nutrition for a baby. So do not hold it precious because you're cutting off the life source of
Right.
energy for a business.
Yeah. I love that. You're also uncovering, even if you think you have an idea, you're just experimenting with what it might look like. So the more you talk about it, the more you're peeling back those layers and like starting to like uncover what it might actually be.
Yes,
Um,
yes. It's like an
yeah,
archaeological dig.
totally.
So
So
for
what about somebody who's a little further down the path, but is in that like in that sort of fundraise, in one of those hard fundraise periods, somewhere between pre-seed and A.
before you build your pitch deck, ask yourself the question, what energy do you want to be in for your fundraise? And I mean, what beliefs do you want to have in your fundraise? For me, a lot of women get scared to fundraise being a woman. I changed the story for myself and I told myself, oh my God, everybody wants to invest in a woman because there aren't enough of them. And even if it's not altruistic, they want to see more women in their portfolio so they can look good to their LPs. I would walk in the door to every meeting and feel like I was special because of that. So I'd say if stories are all just stories in our head, then pick the best one for you to put you in the best energy possible. Because if you come in with these little stories like, oh, I don't know if I can raise. I don't know if our business is big enough. I don't know if we're good enough.
Is
And
this
then
the
you
right
build,
TAM?
right, right. Is
Is
this
this
the
the
right
right
TAM?
TAM
Oh
number?
my God. And if you write your deck from that, you're going to walk in apologetic. You may not say, I'm sorry, I'm taking up your time, but you're hunched over. You don't maintain eye contact. You don't follow up with them because you're like, what right do I have to follow up with them? So get it. You need to wave the magic wand and write out what is the energy you want to be in first and do whatever you have to do to get in that energy as you write the deck. If you write the deck from that place, then you will be in much better hands and you will be much more connected to your genuine enthusiasm for the fundraising for your company.
Oh my gosh, this is so good. I love this. I can't wait for
So,
I can't wait for people to hear this. This is so good.
yay.
Well, amazing. Thank you for the time. Hang out just a little bit
Of
after, and
course.
we'll catch up. But
Thank
yeah, thanks
you.
for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you. My treat.
Yeah.